He's a Microsoft Excel MVP, a Microsoft Expert trainer, a financial modeler, and a data analyst. Over 10 years work experience in banking, insurance, and business development. He is founder of Finex Skills Hub, a co-founder of Business Evolution Systems and Training Limited. The firm has successfully trained over 30 advanced financial modelers in Ghana. He runs the Finex project, a pro bono student training outreach program for students in Microsoft Excel, Office Sales, and Financial Modeling. Bernard also provides consultancy services for startups and existing SMEs in financial management, business planning, and research. He has an active audience online with about 70,000 followers on his LinkedIn account, where he shares tips and tricks on Microsoft Excel and other Office applications. You can check him out on LinkedIn at Bernard Obeng Boateng. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bernard. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Mr. Bernard. Bernard, can you hear me? Hello, Bernard. Can you hear me? You can unmute your mic and go ahead.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me? Hi, Lola. Can you hear me? Good evening.
Hi, Bernard. Good evening. I can hear you.
Great. I was not able to unmute myself earlier. So I'm glad to be here. And I'm going to start sharing soon. So I've shared the link with you so you can practice along for those who can. And so just give me a minute and let me share my screen. Can you see my screen, please?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I guess I've been introduced already. My name is Bernard Obeng Boateng. I'm lead trainer at Finex Skills Hub here in Accra, Ghana. We train in financial modeling, data analytics. We do Python as well and AppSheets. We also do Excel for work. And today my goal is to show you how you can build dashboards with Microsoft Excel. I know in the past few days you've been discussing data analytics generally, but in this session, I want to get hands-on with you so you can see some of the tools that you can use to build dashboards, okay, in Microsoft Excel. Truth is, there are various tools that you can use for data analytics, but Excel has its place. It's used over 700 million users and counting. Whatever you learn here, whatever concepts that you learn here, likely will be applicable when you go to Power BI, okay, or SQL. Okay, some of the concepts are similar. So for those who want to practice along, you can use this URL to download the stats and finish workbook. I have a start file and then a finished file. Okay, so if we are set, then I'd like to introduce you to what I call the tools of trade when it comes to data analytics in Microsoft Excel. So I'm sure in the past few days, you've heard all about data analytics. We are experiencing an explosion of data. So when you click a button, you make a call, even when you are liking stuff on social media, you are generating data. Now, organizations need systems and people to analyze data to give them insights. In Microsoft Excel, that is possible, very possible. So I want to walk you through what I call the schema. Okay, so data comes in different forms in Microsoft Excel. So we can take it from CSV files, we can take it from online, okay, we can take it from folders, even PDF is possible and pictures is possible. Okay, so when data comes in, we prefer to keep the data in what we call tables. Okay, so tables allow for structured referencing. Okay, so it puts all the data in one place and makes it easier for you to analyze, okay, reference in your calculations and all that. So we'll talk about tables and the advantages it has over what we call range of cells. Okay, so we have tables, and then from tables, sometimes when your data comes in, it may not be in a good shape. Okay, so you realize that there are some strange characters in there. Sometimes you prefer that your data sits in certain columns. You have some duplicate columns you want to get rid of. Sometimes you want to transpose and shape it. Okay, that process mainly is classified as getting, transforming, and loading the data. And the tool in Excel to help us do that is called Power Query. Okay, you might have heard about this. It exists in Power BI as well, right? So we are going to use Power Query to shape and transform data, okay, to put it in a shape that will make it easier for us to analyze our data. Okay, now when we are done with Power Query, there are situations where you may be analyzing the data from multiple tables, right? So if you have multiple tables, you need to let all the tables talk to each other, okay, so that you can have one source for your analysis. In Excel, that is possible in an environment called Power Pivot. Okay, so in Power Pivot, the activity we do there is data modeling. Okay, so what we do is we bring all the tables together and we connect them through what we call relationships. I'm going to talk about this or give you real insights when we start our case study, but this is just to give you an overview. So in the data model, we bring all the tables together and then we connect them. Usually the tables are classified into dimension and fact tables. I'm going to go into that and what they represent. So when we create our data model, we now have one source where we can do all our calculations from or create all our analysis and charts. In Microsoft Excel, the main tool for summarizing and aggregating data is the pivot table, right? A very powerful tool for summarizing and aggregating and creating reports. And particularly for our dashboards, this is going to play a very key role. Okay, so from our pivot table, we can now add certain features in Excel. Okay, so we can add our pivot charts, our slicers, our timelines. We can even do spark lines, okay, to create any dashboard that you want to create for management or for yourself. In some cases, because of layouts, we use what we call cube functions. Okay, so in some case studies, you can use cube functions. I'm not going to touch on that today, but so you know that it is available in your data analytics process. Okay, now all this together can feed into one interactive dashboard. Okay, so your dashboard can be on sales, it can be on finance, it can be on health, whatever insights you want to share to management, you can capture all your key performance indicators at a glance, okay, to give insights to management to make decisions. Now, when you create dashboards, they are not flat, I must say. It is alive, it is interactive. So when your source data changes, okay, or it expands, even if you take data away and you refresh, the idea is that you don't have to go through all this again. Whatever new data you've added here would update your dashboard. So take an example, if your data was as at July and you now have August, you just add it. Power Query will take the steps to clean it. The data model will update, your pivot tables will go on, and that will give you an updated dashboard. So this is an overview of what to expect. And I'm going to share the case study, and then we are going to use almost all these tools today. So you can ask any questions that you want in the chat. I'll pick them up as I go. If I'm not able to see the chat, I think Lola or whoever is in charge can prompt me, and then we can answer the questions. Are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So in the world of data analytics, our goal is to deliver insights. So if you work in a bank, we want to know how many customers have signed on to a particular product. Okay, how many loans have gone bad? How much is it? If you sell, you want to know which products are doing well and all that. Now, we are going to use a case study that I'm sure everybody can identify with. So this is a personal finance dashboard, a very simple one. I'm sure everybody handles money. So it is just a basic, I spend, I earn, okay? And I'm able to record every transaction with a date, the description of the transaction, and then sometimes to help me in my analysis, I want to categorize, right? And then I put my amount here. So this is one data set. It goes all the way from January to December. Now, when you move to the next table or the next worksheet, you see another data set. This time around, this is a budget. Okay, so it's a very simple budget. The idea is that the categories that you saw here in column C, okay, are used for the budget. So if I take food, food falls under the class I call fixed, and then it is an expense, okay? And then for each month or for the 12 months, I budget that I'm going to spend this amount for the 12 months. Okay, it's the same for all the categories that I have shown in the transactions area. Okay, so this is one very simple case study, and the concept that we are going to use here is going to be applicable even when the data is complex. Okay, so one thing that is always important is if you're a data analyst, you need to understand the story you want to tell from your data. What insights do you want to share? Okay, so in my transactions data, in my budget data, what am I after? If you're a data analyst, you are always after a value. Okay, a value. So a value can be total spend on entertainment. Okay, or how much did I budget for fuel? Okay, so values are the things that you can aggregate. So all those things you can create as measures or calculations. So once we identify our values, our users, or if you are the user, you are interested in seeing some dimensions. So dimensions is where did I spend this? When did I spend it? Okay, who did I even send it to? Let's take it to the organization. If you are selling, the value will probably be your total sales, right? So the total sales will be the answer to the question probably your finance person would ask you. Okay, but if the question goes on to which product is performing well in this region, okay, that region is a dimension, okay, or which salesperson is giving us this performance, that salesperson angle is a dimension. So values by dimension, that's how we are going to be approaching this. Okay, so if you look at this data set, I can fairly say that something like amount represents my values, right? And then categories is a dimension, right? If I want to analyze by timeline or date, date here can also be a dimension. Okay, so that's how I want to be looking at it, because when you are analyzing your data, you need these two, I call them lens, to be able to deliver insights to your users. Okay, now I mentioned tables, right? So this is a range. Okay, a range is just a collection of cells. Okay, so in Excel, the basic unit for data entry is a cell. So if I select one cell here, I can enter data, but when I collect a lot of cells, I have a range. Usually when data comes into Excel, we work with it in a range form. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this, but for better and efficient data analytics, it's best to convert the data or the range into a table, right? So to insert a table, you can stand anywhere, especially when it's a data block. Okay, and then you go to insert and you can insert a table here. Okay, so as you can see, tables help us organize and analyze related data. So I'm going to insert a table on this. Okay, it highlights the area for my data. I confirm that I have headers. This is very important because it's going to separate Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I have to. Is my screen still live?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So I have converted this into a table. Okay, so my table shows up here. Now, how do I know it's a table? It's usually when you are working with a range of cells, okay, the table contextual tab is not present. Okay, so if I stand in the table, this shows up here, but if I step out, I don't have that contextual tab. So that's sometimes is the guide for you to know whether you have a table or not. Now, reason we are here is that we can name the table, okay, and use some of these tools to deliver insights. So this is my table. I'm going to name this transactions. Okay, so I'll name this transactions. And I'm going to do same with my budget as well. Okay, so a shortcut to insert a table, instead of going to insert and using insert table, is you can stand anywhere and press Control T. Okay, so Control T would also give you the same effect here. So again, I have my table design and then I have my budget here. Okay, so we now have two tables. Now it's easier to reference the whole data set. So if I come here and I do equal to transactions, right? I can now reference the whole data set instead of using a mouse to select for my analysis and all that, right? And in any case, when we go to Power Query, we will be identifying the data set with the names that we've given. Okay. Now, I mentioned that when you have data, it is ideal that your data is clean and is well structured. In fact, there are some 3 golden rules that you have to consider when you are working with data. And I'm going to go through that shortly. So beyond Excel and even in Power BI or SQL, it is important that when data comes in, each column should have a single data type. So as an example, if I have name as a column, everything there should be name. I shouldn't have any other data type, okay, down here, okay? So age should be the same throughout, salary should be the same throughout. And again, I shouldn't have another column doing the role of age, okay, as I go to the right. Okay, so that is the first rule. Now, if my data is well structured, when I highlight a row, okay, that row should have a single record, okay, of the variable I'm analyzing. So take payroll as an example. If I highlight one row, it should give me information on one staff, okay, his age, his salary, and all that. And then what is very important in Excel is that whatever data you put in a cell, okay, should have a single value. So example, you don't put city, comma, town in one single cell. Okay, so if you want to analyze data, this is where you should be heading towards. Okay, so let's look at our 2 data sets and then see if they meet these rules. Hi Lola, am I allowed to ask questions?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I just want to, if you're following, the transaction table is here. It has date, description, category, and amount, right? Then I also have the budget table, category, class, type, and then I have these 12 months spread across. Do you think these two tables are meeting the three criteria I just shared? Anybody? So you can drop your answer in the chat. I'll pick it up. So I've just gone through the three golden rules, right? So do you think transactions and budgets meets these criteria that I just shared? So you can drop your chat in here or okay, so if you look at the transactions table, it appears it's okay. All dates are in one place, description here, category here, and then we have amount here. Okay, there are no strange characters, so this table is fine. Now let's go to the budget. We have category here, we have class here, we have type here. Okay, but for convenience, the layout allows you to put a value in each of the 12 months, right? It serves our purpose, but if you're analyzing this using pivot tables, it will be a challenge because you have 12 columns doing the same thing, giving us dates, okay, and amount. It will be ideal to collapse these two data sets into, let's say, date and amount. Okay, so instead of having all these columns, we can host this data in just about 5 columns. Okay, it is this transformation that can be done in Power Query. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to take these two tables into Power Query and then do all the transformation. Okay, and then when we do the transformation, we can do further analysis on this without having troubles with these duplicated columns. Okay, so let's go to Power Query. I already have a table here. So in Excel, Power Query can be found under the Data tab. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in the schema that Power Query allows us to get, transform, and then load data, right? So depending on your version, most likely under data in the leftmost part, you see Power Query. So Power Query can connect to a lot of data sources, okay, as you can see here. Okay, so these icons represent, recently you can even add pictures, okay, and then convert them into data. But for our purpose, this is a table, right? And the table icon is here. So if I'm standing in this table, I can go to connect from table or range, okay?
Please, if you can hear me, we can't hear you again.
Um, Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Please let's just give him few minutes. Okay, he's back. Hi,
Hi,
Bernard.
Lola, am I on?
Yes, you're on. Please go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I was just about to go to Power Query, and I mentioned that sometimes when your data is okay, you can just analyze it straight away. But the reason we go to Power Query is to transform and shape the data properly. Okay. Now, before we even go into the analysis, I think it's important that we see what outcome we can get or what insights we can get from these two data sets. Okay, so you are spending against a budget. Some of the insights that you can draw from these two tables is which category am I spending a lot on? Okay, in the last quarter of the year, what takes away my money? Have I been able to bring in enough income as I said? Okay, which are my top 5 expenses, my top 5 income lines and all that. You see, in black and white, this will be difficult to see, right? But take this dashboard that we hope to build at the end of the day. Okay, when you analyze data this way, at least at a glance, you are able to see that you budgeted a certain amount for fuel, which is the blue line, but you haven't been able to stay afloat. Okay, so if you check internet, same thing. Okay, and then you can also see, let's say, which month you are spending more or less and all that. You can also see your top income lines. So that is what a dashboard gives you. Okay, at a glance, interact with the data and then get insight. Okay, now before we get this dashboard done, I think it is important that you first identify what values you are getting here. I mentioned total amount spent, total amount received as some of the values. We can see this further by category, okay, by class, by type, by date. So all the by, everything that follows by is a dimension, okay, to give your user insights. So with this, we can now take this to Power Query, and we are taking this to Power Query because we want to transform and shape it, add our dimensions, and then create one data source in the data model for our analysis. I mentioned that when you stand in the table, you see in the ribbon, you see data in the command tabs. I'm sure you can find this. Then in the leftmost part, okay, this is get and transform data. This is Power Query. This is already a table. So standing in here, I will just lift, and then this is my Power Query space, right? So in Power Query, wherever you connect your data from, okay, it comes in as a query. So all queries are listed here. So even though I took this from a table, I can add data from online sources, from PDF, and add it as a query here. Okay, we have 3 main tabs: the home, the transform tab, okay, and then the add column tab. Okay, I'm going to go through this as we progress with our case study. Okay, then in the formula bar, okay, we have some code. Now in Power Query, the code that helps us transform and shape data is called the M code. Okay, you don't really need to type this from scratch. In fact, whatever step of transformation you do will generate an M code. It stores it so that you can execute it again automatically when the data changes at source. Okay, so your M code is sitting here. Then the properties of your query is here. Okay, so this is transactions. Now, every step that you use to change or shape your data will be recorded as a step. Okay, and it's cumulative. Okay, so it helps you audit or track the steps, and then it stores it, as I said, so that changes to your data source can be executed automatically. So that is an overview of Power Query. There's a lot more in here, but in 1 hour, I think this is a good introduction. Now, as I mentioned, we have brought in our transactions, right? We also want to bring in our budget. The first step that was executed was it went to our current workbook, which is Excel, looked for a table called transactions, right? And then brought the content here. This is a very simple M code. So we are going to copy this. So instead of going out and bringing in the budget table, we are going to copy this, and then we'll go to a new source, other sources, and then we have our blank query here. Okay, so a blank query gives you like a plain page for you to generate your formulas or your M code to create data. So here, I'm going to paste what I copied here. And if you know what this means, it means we can change just the red part. Okay, and that is why it's useful to always have tables for your analysis. So easily, I can just change the name from transactions to budget. Okay, and it pulls the data from the budget side. Okay, it looks familiar. It looks like what we had earlier, right? In fact, it's the same data. So we have our categories, class, and type, but I use an M code to pull it from the data source. Okay, so I'm going to name this budget. Right, and it appears most of the work we are going to do on this data set is going to happen on our budget table. So as I mentioned, we have category, class, and type here. Right, this is fine, but these 12 columns, even though it's convenient for us to enter data this way, okay, it's not going to help us. It doesn't meet the data structuring rules that I mentioned earlier. So we are going to do something called on-pivoting. In simple terms, see on-pivoting as collapsing columns into rows, okay? But it's not that simple. What it does is that it will just do some combination of the data types. So if I highlight these 12 columns, you see that the data types you have here is dates and amount, right? So if I collapse these into rows, I can have 2 columns, one for dates, one for amount. Okay, so it comes in as rows. So when you're on pivot, you end up with a longer view of your data. Okay, but when you pivot, you are building around one column, so you are creating more columns. So we are going to on pivot. I have highlighted these 12 columns. Okay, I'll right click. So let me do this. I highlight these 12, right click, and then I will on pivot these columns. Another way would have been to highlight the first 3 and on pivot other columns, right? So when I do this, I have now achieved that layout that I wanted. So categories in one column, class in another, type here, and then I have my dates all in one column called attributes, and then I have my value here. Now let me go into why it has treated this as an attribute and a value. You know, I mentioned that when you are a data analyst, you are always chasing values for starters. Total sales, total profit, total cost, head count. Okay, all those are values. They are things you can measure, right? But attributes help the user see other perspectives of your data set, right? So an attribute, as I said, can be date. An attribute can be the town the product was sold, okay? So attributes and values are the granular points for analyzing data. Now, let's say in your sales data, you have a lot of attributes that speak to the location of your stores. Okay, so store postcode, store location, everything about the store. Okay, so when you combine attributes, you can create what we call a dimension table. Okay, so attributes together give us a dimension table. The two virtually do the same thing, giving us perspectives for our data set. Okay, helping us analyze our values. Okay, so take this in mind. We'll be dealing with attributes and values, but usually when we group attributes, it forms dimension tables, and then you can find values in what we call a fact table. Okay, so fact table measures or records the main activity of the organization or your business. If you sell, you record it in the fact table. Okay, if you look at patients, all the attendance and all those things happen in the fact tables. You keep recording the activities. Okay, so most likely whatever you are calculating will be a value in the fact table. So let me rename this. This is going to be date, and then I'm going to rename this as amount. Okay, now one key thing is when you're analyzing data, whether in Excel or Power BI, it is important that you ensure the content of each column has the same data type. Okay, so Power Query ensures this by giving you a preview, okay, of the type of data it has profiled here. ABC means text, right? But sometimes when you have a mix, okay, you will have to correct that. Otherwise, your calculations will be in error. So for an example, this is date, but it's showing ABC, right? So we have to convert this into a proper date. So I'll select ABC and then convert this into a proper date. Now, if you have observed, all the things I'm doing to shape this data are being recorded here, right? Okay, so amounts is fine, dates is fine, type is fine. Let's go to transactions and ensure that we have same here. So this is storing it as date and time, right? So I can convert this into a proper date. It's asking whether I want to replace the current step. Yes, because usually it executes an automatic transformation for you on the data type. So I have date, description, category, and amount. Always ensure you do this so that you can have the data types for your calculations. Hi Lola, am I live?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, so let me share my screen again. It appears we have an unstable net. Are you following? Hi Lola.
Hi. Hi, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So currently, yes, we can hear you, but the internet has not been stable. Also, they are saying that you are a little bit fast. Can we go a little bit slower?
Okay, well noted. Thanks for the feedback. Because I had to do this in an hour and
Mm,
the recording was going to be available,
yes.
but I get you. I'm going to slow down and I'm willing to stop if you have questions. Please let me know. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So please let me know if you have questions. It is important you understand the concepts, and then later when you are practicing, it is easier for you. Okay, so let me see if you have questions so far on what we've covered. Are there any questions? Yes. So you can put the question in the chat, I guess, and I will read and respond.
Bernard, let me advise that you just go ahead. So if there's any question, I and Bolu are here to check all the questions. So we'll let you know if there's a question.
Great. Okay, so keep them
Okay, so
coming.
there's one question here. Bolu, would you like to read the questions?
There's a question here from Helen. She said, how did you copy code on transaction table?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the code is displayed when you hit the source step here. Okay, so just like you have in Excel, your formula bar, you can step in here, okay, and then use your mouse over it. That's one way. Or you can step in and do Control A to highlight it. Okay, and then Control C to copy. Okay, so two ways. So I hope that answers the question. So Control A or mouse over after you've selected the source.
So another question here says, please, did you initially convert your data set into tables?
Yes, I did. When we started, I converted the data sets from a range to a table. Okay, but usually, even if you don't and you are trying to lift the data into Power Query, Power Query converts into a table first before it comes into the Power Query environment. So to insert a table, I showed two ways. You can select any cell in the data set, go to insert, and then you hit table, or you can press Control T, okay, to convert that range into a table. Any more questions?
Yes, there's another one that says, how do you create a blank sheet for budgets?
Okay, so to create the blank sheet for budget, I went to new source, other sources, okay, and you see blank query is here, right? So that is how you create your blank query.
Then another question says, are we supposed to use the first rows as headers?
Yes, so once you convert into a table and these register as headers, okay, it comes into Power Query same. So ideally, these should be used as headers, the first row, the one that has the column names, right? In fact, if your data comes in, it doesn't do that, you can use this option under Home, okay, use first row as headers. It will push up whatever caption that is locked in row 1 as the header. Any more? Okay, so keep them coming. I'll probably come and look for questions every 10 minutes to make it easier for you to understand the concept. Okay, so my apologies if I was moving too fast. Okay, so I have transactions and budget here, right? Now, I mentioned that if you look at what you are doing with these two tables, you are using it to record everything that you spend and earn. Okay, so there's some activity going on here. And then with your budget too, you are recording how much you are budgeting for category, class, and type, right? So I mentioned that when you are collecting data, okay, where you are recording the activity is usually called the fact table. Okay, so if you are selling, where the records are going, the sales records, okay, is the fact table. So here we can fairly say that these two tables are our fact tables, right? But it has our values essentially. But when you do your dashboard, people want to know what they spent on when they spent. Okay, and that is where dimensions become important here. So if you look at this data set, there are basically two main dimensions that we can use for insight. Okay, the first set is on the spending categories or earning categories. Okay, we can ask questions on category, class, and type on our values. Okay, the second set is dates. Okay, we can ask when, how we spent, which quarter, and all those things. Okay, so that's how you look at your data set. First, draw out the value. What is the calculation? What is the key measure that my users are after? Okay, I'll calculate that, put it somewhere. But then questions that will give insights, okay, can be put into dimension tables. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and create two dimension tables. One giving us all the categories that we need for this analysis, and the other to house our dates. Okay, so in data analytics, the date part is called the calendar table. I'll explain that when we get to that point. Okay, now the good thing about Power Query is you can even use it to generate data that wasn't in your data source, right? So this is what we are going to do. We are going to duplicate or mirror the budget query. Why are we doing this? We are doing that because it is that table that contains the details of category, class, and type. Okay, so if you are following, I would click on this budget, right click, and then there are two ways you can do this. You can duplicate and then you can reference, right? So I'm going to reference this. Okay, so I've referenced this. It gives me the same content, right? So the reason I did that is to get the data for my categories. Okay, so going over this again, you just right click and then you can reference. Okay, so I'm going to name this categories, okay, as the table that gives me insight on what I spent on, which class, which type, and all that. Okay, now because I'm looking for just these three columns, okay, I'm going to highlight what I need, which is just these three. How did I highlight? I select a column, hold down the shift key, and then I'll do a right selection. You can also use the mouse to do this, okay? So these three columns are highlighted. I don't need the rest of the columns. So what I'm going to do is to right click and then remove other columns. Okay, so depending on what you want to achieve, the tools for transforming the data is available in Power Query. Just a bit of creativity. But what is important is you know clearly what your end goal should be. Okay, so I'm going to remove other columns. Okay, now when it comes to tables that help us analyze our values, we don't need duplicates in that table. So for example, if I need to analyze data by social, okay, and sometimes this is the least granular column. It means it is from this that all the others are derived. We don't need duplicates in this particular column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the whole of my table, right click, okay, and then I will remove duplicates here. Okay, so essentially when I take social, which is something I can analyze on, it tells me the class and then the type, whether it is an income or an expense. Okay, so with this table, I can analyze my values by categories. Okay, we call this a dimension table. It has three attributes, okay, that speak to categories. Okay, now I mentioned the second one. The second one is the perspective on dates, giving us insights on when we spend. Okay, so we need to create a similar table that contains dates. Now, when you're analyzing data with dates, it is important that you create something called a calendar table. Because you see, in our original transactions table, even though we have dates, not all days are present here. So from 7th January, we skip to 11th, right? So if you spent on 7th and you didn't spend on the 8th, it doesn't mean there's no 8th in your budget table. Okay, so to create a very uniform calendar table that can take care of all your tables, okay, the dates there have to be continuous. So when I start from 1st January, it should continue without breaking or skipping any days. And that will be useful in any date analysis I want to use. So in data analytics, in Excel or Power BI, we don't use the native columns that has dates for analysis. We create a special table called a calendar table that will help us analyze by date. Okay, so I'm going to go through another process to generate this dimension called calendar table. So again, I'll go to new source, other sources. Okay, so if I'm starting a blank query, this is usually the step. Okay, so I do the same thing and it opens this blank query. What am I doing here? I want to generate a calendar table and I'm going to use an M code, right, to do this. So I'll take it slowly so that you can pick it from the recording. So that M code starts with number from, which is a function. Okay, so number dot from. So it means I'm starting at a particular point. Okay, then I'll go to another function. So I'll open my brackets and then put in another function called list dot min. So list dot min means that I am going into a column and I'm taking the least date there. We are doing this to pick the very first date of your data set. Okay. Okay. So list dot min, which table? From the transactions table. So I'll bring my transactions table. So I've called my transactions table. By now, I hope you appreciate why it's important you use tables. Okay. Then I'll bring a square bracket and then I'll call the column date. Okay. And I'll close my square bracket. So this is basically saying that I'm going into the transaction table. I'm picking the first date in there, the least date. Okay, so that's 1 point. I'll close off the list.min and I'll close off the number.from, right? Then I'm going to copy this, mouse over, and then Control C, right? So it is a range from this to that. Okay, so we've done the left side. Now let's do the right side. So 2 is 2 dots. Okay, so 2, and then I'll paste this other side. I shouldn't include the equal sign. Okay, so this one is giving me the least date. Okay, and this one would give me the highest or the latest date. Okay, and it's dynamic. So as new dates come in, it will be changing or updating. So instead of list.min, I'm going to use list.max. Okay, so that is the M code I'm going to use to generate the continuous series of dates, okay, for my calendar table. Okay, then because I want a list, I'm going to put curly brackets around this. Okay, so number.from list.min, transactions date, close two brackets, dot, number.from list.max, transactions date, and then I'll press enter. So when I press enter, it generates the series. Okay, that is the oldest date to the latest date. Okay, and it's dynamic. You can use this anytime you are creating your tables and you need a calendar table to help you analyze. Okay, so it gives me the very first point, which is list. Okay, and I'm going to convert this into a table. So in the top left, you see convert to table. And I'm going to convert this into a table. Okay, this dialog box pops up. I'm not going to do anything here. I'll just click OK. And I start a new query, right? Okay, so what you see here essentially are dates. Okay, so dates in Excel translates as the number of days since 1st January 1900. Okay, so I'm going to name this date, check the data type. ABC123 means it's a default. It hasn't formatted it yet. So I'm going to convert this to a date, and you realize that my calendar or my date type is month day. So it starts all the way and then gives me in a continuous way, right? Okay, so this is the first column of our calendar table. Let me name the query calendar. Now, from this granular column, you can extract whatever dimension you want to use in your analysis. So I can stand here and then go to add column. Now, when I came to Power Query, I said there were 3 tabs, right? So there's a key difference between what you do under transform and what you do under add column. If you highlight a column and then you make any changes under transform, the result will replace what was there. Okay, it will replace the column content. But if you do any transformation under add column, the result will become a new column, right? Okay, so I now have my date here, and I want to extract whatever date dimension I want to use. So I will use date, the date button here, go in there and then pick year. Okay, if you want to use year as your analysis, you can draw that. I'll take date again. So always come back to the first column, go to date again, and then extract month. So this will give me month values 1 to 12. And then I also need my name of month, right? So any date dimension you want to use in your analysis, you can draw it from this point. And I've already explained why we went through the calendar table. Okay, now one last transformation I want to do is for what I want to achieve, I want to abbreviate my month name, right? So I'm going to use transform. So just to give you an example of how the transformation differ under transform and add column. Here I am under transform. What I want to do is to extract the first characters. Okay, so I'll go to the first characters. I've highlighted the month name and I want to extract the first 3 characters. Okay, so when I do that, you realize that it didn't come as a new column. It replaced the existing content of the column. Okay, so that's the key difference between transforming and then adding, okay, activities in Power Query. Okay, so before I proceed, I want to know if there are any questions. We are done with our job at Power Query. We are moving to Power Pivot.
Most of the questions have already been answered. So you
Okay.
can go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we've now covered these steps. We brought in our transactions table. Okay, we just did one transformation here. We use M-code to bring in our budget table. We did some transformation here. We unpivoted, we renamed. Okay, those are the main activities that we did here. Our data types are okay. Then from our budget table, we drew our categories dimension. Okay, and then we have our calendar. So we now have 2 dimension tables, categories and calendar, against 2 fact tables, budget and transactions. The final thing we need to do is to load this hard work, okay, into the data model. And I said the data model allows you to bring multiple tables together, connect them using relationships, okay, and then you can get one data source. So close and load to. First one will default to a table output. Second one will give you options. Okay, so here, when I am loading, I can load directly as a table, straight to a pivot table report, straight to a pivot chart, or I can only create a connection. Now, if you don't need the physical output in your workbook, you can hold it as a connection. It allows you to go back, make changes and all that. So we hold the results of the 4 queries as a connection, right? And then most importantly, we want to add this to the data model, right? So from Power Query, you can jump straight to the data model this way. Okay, so I'll click OK. And we are now transitioning from Power Query to the data model. So it loads our 4 queries: transactions, budget, categories, and calendar, right? Okay, so where do we find Power Pivot? In my case, it's already activated. But if you are starting and you've not used Power Pivot before, this is how you activate it. Go to data. Okay, so this is the data tab. And in the data tools, you see this lemon cube. Okay, if you're using it for the first time and you click on this, it gives, after some few seconds, it would activate this Power Pivot tab for you, assuming you are using 2016 upwards. Okay, so when you go back to practice, it can be there, or you may have to activate it. So this is Power Pivot, allowing us to create a data model and bring all our queries or tables together. So I'm going to manage, right? So I'll go to manage. And when I go to manage, just like the Power Query, it opens a new window for me, right? So my tables are here, transactions, budget, categories, and calendar are here, right? Now, this is a data view, but I can switch to what we call a diagram view. Okay, so when I switch to a diagram view, the 4 queries are now displayed here. This is important because it gives you some visual guide on how to connect the tables. Okay, so I mentioned that the key activities that we are measuring is our daily transactions against our budget. These are our fact tables. We can calculate our values from here, the totals. Okay, but when it comes to insights, we can describe those values by categories, which is a dimension, or by date, which is a calendar. So usually that's how we place it. Your fact tables down, and then whatever you are describing your values by as dimensions. If it sits on top, or sometimes it surrounds it, okay, we call this the star schema. Okay, so don't worry about that. But our goal here is we have 2-dimension tables. Now, remember, these 2 tables were created sort of from these fact tables. Okay, it then means that there's a column in there that it can communicate with. Okay, so here, if we take category has social, fuel, and all those things. One unique list, no duplicates. Okay, what it was created from, or when the activities are recorded or we are budgeting, we keep repeating categories several times in the fact table. Okay, so this part here, so you have category, unique list, category, duplicated list. Okay, so because you are recording activities continuously, most likely the categories and dates will be repeated several times in the fact table, but what you are using to describe the data appears only once. Okay, so category and category are common here. Okay, these are the primary columns that we created to give us our categories dimension table. So I can connect this to that. That version that we have in the dimension table is called a primary key, and this is the foreign key. So I'll take this and then connect it to my dimension table up there. Okay, you can spot another one here. Category from transactions also connects to this category this way. Okay, and as I do that, you see the lines connecting like that. So I'm creating this data model using the common relationships. That's basically what I'm doing in Power Pivot. Okay, now let's connect the calendar part. So in the calendar part, there's a date here, Okay, so dates can connect to a calendar using dates and dates. Okay, and then I have another date here that can also connect this way. If you are using sales, most likely your sales data is down here. Your product list, your location, your customers register, and all those things are dimensions for your sales. So you can connect it in the same way. Okay, so Power Pivot has the data model, brings multiple tables, we connect using relationships. Okay, now we are done here, but we'll come back and then create something for our key values. So this is Power Pivot. Before I transition, are there any questions so far?
Okay, so the most recent question says, how did you pick the month, date, and year from a column?
Okay, so in case you missed that, so this is my original worksheet, right? And I can go back to Power Query using the data tab. Even though we are done with Power Query, we can still go back, right? So I can go to data, queries and connections, and then this pane opens to my right. Okay, so I can double click any of the queries and then I go back into my Power Query. Now, this is how I generated the months. You know, when we finished the calendar, okay, I had only this column, dates. Okay, so you select the date, you go to add column, and then you use this date icon to draw whatever extra columns you need, right? So if I select quarter right now, it will tell me the quarter of the year as a new column. So that's how I did it.
Okay, thank you. Another question here says, why not model the data in Power BI? Why Power Pivot?
Why not model the data in Power BI? Good question. Here's the thing. Power Pivot, Power Query, okay, are engines for analyzing data that exists in Excel and Power BI. Okay, so it's not as if one software has claim to these. In Microsoft's intelligence, Power Query works same way it works in Power BI. Okay, so I don't have to go to Power BI to do my data modeling. Okay, I mean, there's a few changes, extra DAX functions in Power BI and all that, but essentially, you can have Power Query do the same thing it does in Power BI. Same thing with Power Pivot in the data model. The data model is also same in Power BI. So I don't have to go to Power BI to create a data model. I can do that in Excel. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you. I think that says he hasn't responded yet, but I'm sure that answers his question.
Okay, so
the other questions are being answered by the other moderators in the chat box.
Great. Okay, so at the end of the day, I hope you can take something away. Excel is very powerful. It's just that we don't use it well. A lot of the things that you probably step out to go and do, okay, in other systems are present here. Okay. Power BI and Excel arguably are the most powerful tools in data analytics. If you get these concepts in Excel very well, same applies in Power BI as well. Okay, just a little change with the reporting and collaboration part and some DAX formulas. So let's continue. We now have a data model. We have Power Pivot here. Now, I said that you are after measures or values, right? So we are going to keep our calculations, which we call measures, separately. Then we can come in and then create dimensions to analyze our data and then get this final dashboard. Okay, so actual is a measure. Budget, so whatever calculation you can do from the fact table, okay, can be treated as measures. Like the balance on my account is a measure, right? So we are going to calculate the key numbers that you are seeing here, right? And to do that in Excel, you can create measures out of your data model. So how do we do that? Now, to keep our measures in one place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a separate table for that. Hi Lola, am I live?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay, so I was just about creating a separate table, if you like, for my measures, right? I've explained what measures are. So I copy an empty cell, right? And then I come to, so this is the gateway to Power Pivot. Okay, so manage. So I hit the manage, and then it brings me to the Power Pivot window. Now, because I copied, this paste is active. Okay, so the paste under home is active. So remember, I copied a cell and then I paste. So when I paste, it pops up this dialog box, and I'm in the process of creating an empty table. So I'm going to call this my measures. Okay, and I'll click OK. So just as we're able to create blank queries in Power Query, you can also create blank tables if you like. Okay, so my measures is created, is empty. Then I'll click on the header, which is only one column, and then hide from client tools. Okay, this would convert it as a formula, a container for my formulas. Okay, so I'll hide from client tools, right? And then now I can go ahead and then create my measures. Okay, how do we create a measure? So if your Power Pivot tab is active, you go to measures. Okay, so measures are the key values that you are calculating. New measure. Okay, this dialog box pops up, and then I have my transactions, my budget. These tables are there, but my destination is I want all my measures to be in a table called my measures. Okay, now the key calculation that we'll get from our transactions table, I'm going to call it actual. Okay, so the thing is, when I calculate this, I can access and use it any way I want. I can slice and dice it with any dimension. Okay, so it's going to be called actual, and it's basically a sum. So here I'm using DAX. Okay, so DAX exists in Power BI, same language exists in data model in Power Pivot. Okay, so this is DAX. I am calculating on my transactions table in the column amount, and that is why I am using this. So sum transactions amount, then I'll close off my brackets. Okay, so in this dialog box, you can check if your DAX formula is correct. So this is a very simple DAX formula. You can also format your measure. Okay, so I want to use a number separator, and then I'll reduce this to 0, and I will click OK. Okay, so what I've basically done is I've created one calculation I'm going to use several times here, in all the calculations that you see here. Okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
Bernard. I don't know. Am I the only one? But I'm not seeing the screen you're sharing. I don't know if I'm the only one. I
Wow.
can only
I can
see.
see the screen.
I can only see Teams here. Bolu, you
They
said
say
what?
they can. They say they can.
Okay, maybe it's
I
just
can see
me.
the screen. Maybe you should try and join.
Maybe it's just me. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have created my first measure. My second measure is all the numbers from my budget side, right? So same process, new measure. My measures is my destination, and then I'm going to call this budget. So I keep saying that if you're a data analyst, you are after values. Calculate your values first. Then your dimensions will come in later as slices or whatever visual you want to use. Okay, so sum, and then I'm going to create this from budget amount. I'll format this. I'll use 1,000 separator. Decimal place is 0. Check my formula to be sure everything is okay. So same process. And then I have 2 measures now. I can create a measure from a measure. So I have 2 measures. If you go to manage measures, you see that I have actual and budget here. Okay, so I can create a new one, which is balance. So at every point, if I'm using any visual, I want to see the balance on, let's say, fuel. Okay, I can do that easily. So it's going to be straightforward budget, which is a measure, minus actual. Okay, so this is better than using the local numbers in the table. Because for measures, it can be analyzed using any visual or slicer in your data model or dashboard. Okay, so I'll do this and then I'll click OK. So that is my balance. Okay, so I have 3 measures now. Now, with these 3 measures, we are aiming to create this dashboard, right? So when you are done, the next thing is to create the calculations for your dashboard. And in fact, this is a very simple dashboard. So we need only 3 key calculations. So the first one is actual. The second one is budget. The third one is balances. Then we can analyze our actual versus budget by month. Okay. And then later we have our top 5 expense, top 5 income. Okay. So you realize that when we do that and then we throw in our slices, okay, it's easier to just deliver insights like that. So bottom line, we are doing calculations for this dashboard. So we've done Power Query, we've done Power Pivot. We are now going to do our calculations on our measures. So I create a new sheet and I'm going to name this calculations. So understand it, your dashboards are driven by your pivot tables and measures. Okay, so at the back of that nice dashboard are some pivot tables driving each indicator. So number 1, actual. Now that I have my data model present, I can insert a pivot table. Okay, so I went to insert pivot table from the data model, right? So I'll do this and then I get this dialog box, existing worksheets. I want to place my pivot table here, right? So this is a pivot table. Pivot table allows us to summarize, okay, our values by rows and columns. Again, that concept of values by dimensions comes here again. So anytime you have a pivot table, you are first starting with your values, okay? Then if you want to analyze this value by any dimension, it can be put in rows or columns or as a filter. That is how the architecture is. So I want just actual, so this is fine. It's dynamic enough when I throw in my slices and all that. Okay, so I'm going to copy this. Sometimes it's best to copy instead of creating from scratch, okay, because the pivot table reads cache. So cache is like memory for the data for the pivot table. Okay, so when I copy from the same pivot table, I can change the fields. Okay, so here instead of actual, I want budget. Okay, and then finally I can copy this, Control C, and then I'll paste this. Okay, then I have my balance here. So that's how simple it is. 3 pivot tables from our data model, but these are not flat calculations because we can insert slices on this, okay, to help tell a better story in our dashboard. So that's calculation 1. Now let's go to calculation 2. So in calculation 2, we want to, so these 3 that we just calculated is going to give us number 1, number 2, and number 3, right? Now let's go to the pivot table that will give us this one, which is analyzing my actual and budget values by dimension, month name, right? So I'll come here to month by actual versus budget. I try to label them so that you know what you did. So again, if you like, you can copy and then paste. Okay, I already have actual here, so I'm going to add budget to it. Okay, and then come and locate my dimension. It's in the calendar table. Okay, so I want month name, and I'm going to push this to the rows part, right? So at this point, I've created the background for my dashboard here. Okay, but the date is not sorted properly. It is sorting it alphabetically instead of chronologically, right? So from January to December is what we want. You can achieve this or resolve this in the data model. Okay, so we'll go back to the data model and then we go to manage. Now, there's a reason when we were creating the calendar table, we dropped month values or numbers. Okay, so when your data is not sorted properly, your month name, you can arrange it properly using the order of your month values. Okay, that function is available in the data model. So I came to my calendar, selected month name. Okay, sort by column is located here somewhere in the middle. So which column am I using to order this? That's basically what I'm doing here. So sort by column, month name is what I've selected. I want to sort it by month, which is the month values, right? So when it happens to you, this is how you resolve it. Then I click OK. Okay, so this should resolve that problem. So I have created my second calculation. Now with pivot tables, there are some settings that you can work on. So example, I don't need grand totals here. So when I go to design, I can switch off my grand totals, right? And then just like that, I have my second calculation. Let me do my third calculation. So Lola, I want to be sure how much time I have. I know I asked for extra 30 minutes, but
Benna, please just go ahead because we on tomorrow we don't have lectures tomorrow. So whatever you teach us today, we'll just go over them and do something on it tomorrow. So please just go ahead.
okay, that's fine. Thank you. So we'll try and finish the dashboard so that at least you can have a full case study. So calculation number 3 is I want to create this one, my top 5 expenses. Okay, so by now you are connecting the pivot tables to the dashboards, the indicators here. So this is my top 5, right? So how do I create my top 5? I can begin with a copy of my pivot table. Okay, so when I drop this, and truth is sometimes you have a pivot table, but you can't see the field. It happens because under the Analyze tab of your pivot table, your field list is turned off. So if you can't find it, don't call IT. It's just switched off from the field list, right? So here, my value is actual. I want to see it by the categories dimension. Now, please, when you are drawing a dimension to analyze your value, don't come and pick the category version in the fact table. In fact, it is best practice to hide the foreign key in the fact table so that you don't confuse your users. So we are picking the category from the categories dimension table, the one with the unique list, to analyze by row or column, right? So I'm going to push this here. So remember, my goal is to get the top 5, right? So top 5 income, top 5 expense. Now, what I'm going to do is when I draw in my categories by actual, I will select any of the categories here. Right click, okay. So this is the process of getting top 5 every time. So I'll right click and then I'll go to filter. And then I'll see top 10 here. Okay, so the dimension or the row side, you select any value, you see filter in the right menu, top 10, right? So this dialog box pops up. Top, you can switch to bottom if you want. I want my top 5 every time by actual. Okay, then I'll click OK. And it's not a flat calculation or update here. It's going to always update and give you top 5. So I'll select one value in the actual cell to sort this properly. We still have top 5, but just that it's not sorted properly. So I'll take data and then I'll do Z to A. Right. So this currently is showing me income and expense combined, but I can show only expense and only income when I bring in my slices. Okay, so these are the raw calculations that is going to drive our dashboard. Now, when you bring in your calculations, right, you need to create something for the user to interact with the dashboard. Okay, so it's not enough to put these flat charts and I can't ask questions on other dimensions. Okay, so example, I can switch to internet. I can select half year. Okay, these things are possible because of slices. Okay, so slices are like filters. So one element of dashboards is slices and timelines. Okay, so let's insert slices. And because we have a data model, it is very easy to create slices. So we can go to insert, and then you see slicer here. Okay, so slicer brings a unique list in any column so that you can filter your visuals or your measures by that. So I click on slicer, this dialog box pops up, and then I go to my data model, right? Then I have this blue table here, sorry, blue highlight here, and then I'll click open. Okay, so when I click open, all my tables are here. But as I said, we are taking the slices from the dimension tables. So not budget. In calendar, we can interact with month name. So I'll check month name as a slicer. Okay, we can also interact here with type, the one that will show us whether it's income or expense. And then we can also interact with category. Okay, if you want to tell another story, you can pick any other slicer that you want from here. Okay, so this is fine. I think 3 slices is what we use there. And then I'm going to click OK. So you have category slicer, you have type slicer, and then you have month slicer. Okay, so this will be on standby waiting for us later when we go to our dashboard. Okay, so if you take a row call or a list or inventory, you see that we've provided for everything here, apart from this guy. So this is called a spark line. Okay, so it's a very nice tiny chart. Okay, that shows you the data series, okay, in a cell. Okay, it's a very nice thing you can use. So we want to do this. Now, if you understand what is going on here, it's showing you the highest month that you spent. Okay, so if I clear my slicer, it also gives me the low point as well. Okay, so to create this spark line, what we need to do is to show a dynamic version of this pivot table. Okay, so let me draw out these slices out to create space here. So we want to mirror this. Okay, so we want to mirror this. So I'm going to copy the month names. Okay, and because January to December is not going to change, I'm going to paste these as values. Okay, so I just want to do a lookup. So a lookup would give me, because of the slices, which numbers are present and which ones are not. Okay, usually spark lines and charts, okay, do not plot values that are not available or NA. Okay, so that we can achieve that dynamic effect. That is why we are using this approach. We could have inserted it directly in the pivot table. Okay, so I'm going to use a lookup function to see what my actual for each month is. So I'm going to use XLOOKUP. This is available in 2019 onwards. You can also use index match if it's not available. Okay, so XLOOKUP, my lookup value is January. Okay, that is what I'm looking with. I'm looking at January from this range. Okay, I'll lock this. And then my result is going to come from actual. And then I'll log this as well. Okay, now the reason I use XLOOKUP is that it provides an option for what should be returned if I don't find anything. Okay, so I'm going to use NA. Okay, I said NAs cannot be plotted in chart and sparkline. So in that case, when you filter and the month's numbers are not available, it shows an NA. Okay, so I have this and then I can copy this down. Okay, so it's basically the same thing, but in effect, when I connect this slicer and some months are not showing, you see that NAs show for that particular one. Okay, so far as our dashboard is concerned, we've provided all the tools for our dashboard, and usually this is the process. Okay, after you do your Power Query stuff, your data model and all the calculations, your measures are created. You come and do the calculations for each KPI you want to show in the dashboard, and then you can proceed. So we are going to do the dashboard as a final step. I'll pause here and see if there are any questions.
Questions? There are no questions.
Okay, so if there are no questions, then we'll proceed with our dashboard. Now, how do we create a dashboard? It's usually an empty sheet, right? So I've created this dashboard here, and I'm going to rename this dashboard, right? And I normally do what we call a mock-up. Okay, so the mock-up would give you an idea where each segment is going to go. So I have actual in one room here, budget and so on. Okay, then I also leave margins. So A, E, I, M, okay, and Q are margins. It helps with the visualization to separate the elements, right? So A, E, I, M, Q. Note that we are going to use that. So you start off with a margin. So A, code control, E, I, M, right? And I think it was Q. So these are my margins. Okay. Once you've selected them, you select them holding control one after the other so that you can hold all the cells together. So I'm going to reduce the column width. Okay. I can do that using this shortcut. You press Alt. So when you press Alt, these command tabs light up, and then you can use the letters to go where you want to go, just like using the mouse. Okay, but I'm used to these shortcuts, so that's one way to navigate the ribbon. So Alt H for home. Okay, then O for format. Okay, and then W for managing the column width. Okay, so Alt HOW. I do this because I want to put in 2 for my margins. Okay, so clearly you see that my margins have gone in there. Okay, now the next thing you need to do is now mock up where everything is going to be. So you look carefully, you realize that our first set is from B5 to D7, right? So B5 to D7 is what I've highlighted. So once you highlight it, you can just put a simple outside border around it. Okay, so this is my first placeholder. Okay, it helps so that you're not all over the place when you start your dashboard. And then I will repeat the same process. So in Excel, the shortcut to repeat a process is F4. Okay, whatever you did, whether you bolded, you applied a color, whatever formatting you did, you can press F4 in the same setting and then it repeats it. Right? Then I'll do another one for my balance, F4. Okay, then I'll do one for my spark lines, F4. Okay, then I'll come and do the placeholder for these two charts. So this is B11 to 22. Okay, so B11, let me just zoom out a bit. Now, the thing about dashboards is that ideally, the user should be able to see all the indicators at a glance. Okay, so don't design it such that the person has to scroll right or scroll down. So this is B22, F4 for this. Okay, and then J11 to P22, F4 for that. Okay, so this is going to be my slicers area. Okay, and then I'll put my other slicer here. So this is a simple mock-up. The idea is to give you some guide on where you are going to place each element. Okay, now when it comes to dashboard, I leave it to your creativity, but the thing is you are telling a story. So make it precise, don't overdo it. Let's go straight to the point. Your color choice should also be a bit calmer. Okay, you can use either what I call a white mode or a dark mode. I'm a fan of a dark mode, okay, because it sort of points out the key things. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I did this dark mode. So after I've mocked my background or my dashboard, I can highlight the whole worksheet, okay, and then I'm going to fill. So this is the color I'm going to use. First pillar, second, third, fourth pillar. This, okay, the one that has a 25% darker blue-gray text. Okay, it's not too black, it's not too loud. Okay, so that is what I'm going to use. You still have your mockup in place, right? So this is going to be the background. And then while we are here, let's set the font color. So my font color is going to be white so that anything I type would appear nicely. And then the font I normally like is Berlin Sun FB. So I'm going to do all that here, right? So I'm making progress. We are almost there. This is the dashboard mockup. And then I'm going to now place my objects inside. So this is a shape. Just a normal rectangle shape, right? So I'm going to insert it over my area. So I'll go to insert, go to illustrations, shapes, and then I'll pick this rectangle here. Okay, so if you like, you can press the Alt key as you draw this. Okay, it makes it fit into the grid. Okay, so that is how you draw the shape. And then you will format this. So what we are going to do is I'll take the shape format, shape fill. Okay. Earlier I used the 25% darker in the fourth pillar. Okay, for contrast, I'm going to use the nest shade. Okay, so I'll use this nest shade for the fill, right? Now, while I'm here, I can take off the outline. Okay, then I'll go to shape effects to put in my shadow. We are doing this only once. So once we do it, we'll copy it for the rest. Okay, so I'll come to shadows, go to shadow options. Okay, and then here, I'll choose the type of shadow I want. The first one, outer. And then the color is going to be this 5% darker white. So I like this style because it gives it some 3D feel, okay, for emphasis. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. So once this is done, I can copy this 2 times, but to maintain the alignment, normally what you do is you press Control Shift together, you click on the shape, and then you drag it to the right. This ensures that you don't go out of your alignment. Okay, so Control Shift, click the shape, hold the 3 keys, and then you drag to wherever you are going. Okay, so I'll do same for this one too in my mockup, and then I'm here, right? Okay, so that is for these 3. And once we have this, let's proceed and bring in our numbers. Okay, so to insert a number in a shape, this is the process. You select the shape, okay? Then you click in the formula bar, right? So when you click in the formula bar, you put in an equal sign, and then you come to where your calculations is, and then you fetch the number. So I'll just select this, and then I'll press enter. So that's how you put it in the shape. It's linked to that cell. So it's here, but it's black on black, so you can't see it. So what I need to do is, while it is highlighted, I'll change the font to white. Okay, and then I'll change the font type to Berlin Sun. Okay, and then increase my font to about 28, middle, center align, and then I have this. Okay, so this is dynamic. It's linked to the cell. Let me do same for the budget side. So I'll come here and I'll select this as well. And then I'll select that for the balance as well. Okay, so the reason I did this is that when you do the first one, you can select, go to home, and then use this format painter to copy what you did and apply it here. But to keep the format painter active, I will double click instead of clicking once. So I'll double click this, and then I'll touch this second one, and then I'll touch the third one. Okay, so that's how you do that. You do that, and then you can hit escape when you are done. Okay. Okay, now let's create our spark line. So the spark line normally is created in a cell, right? So I can stand in a cell, which is my destination cell, go to insert, and then you see spark line. There are three shapes: line, column, and win and loss. So I'm going to use column. Okay. Location range is where I started from. Now it's asking for the data range. So I will come to the data range, come to my calculations, and then highlight the range of numbers. Okay, so this is going to give us the 12 points for our data sets for our spark line. So I'll click OK, and it's currently locked in this N5. Okay, now you can expand the spark line into multiple cells or into a range. So I've selected this. Then I'll go to the spark line. Sorry, I'll go to home. Okay, and then look for merge and center. So merge and center will now collapse the spark line into this big area. Okay, now with this tool or this feature, it has its own tab for settings. Okay, so I'm going to change the color. This is my blue. I like this blue. Okay, so I can change this blue, and then I can also mark certain colors for effect. So I can change the high point. So in here, I want to just show the highest point in the 12 months, okay, as a different color. So this is going to be green. I'll come here again, and the low point, I want it to be red. Okay, so I have this effect. Again, this is dynamic, right? So we are gradually filling in, and that is the process of creating a dashboard. So the next step is for this chart, our trend chart. So our trend chart, we have a pivot table that is going to give us that already. So we are going to highlight or stand in there, go to insert, and then we can insert a pivot chart on this. So when you insert a pivot chart, it's the same dialog box with normal charts, but we are changing it to a line with markers, right? So this is going to give us this chart. In fact, by default, it's not very nice, but we can format it to make it less noisy so that you let the user focus on what matters. So I have actual budgets. These, we can take them off. They are called filled buttons. So when you select the chart, okay, you can go to pivot chart, analyze, filled buttons, and then you can hide all. Okay, then we can also delete these labels. We'll put them on the line. Okay, so as much as possible, reduce the noise. And then we can format the legend. Now, the trick is when you are formatting any part of a chart, you can select the chart. Okay, you can select that part of the chart and then you can press Ctrl 1. When you press Ctrl 1, any setting available for that particular part pops up. So in this case, I want to place this at the bottom, right? Okay, so for the rest of the setting, I can transport the chart. I'll cut it, Ctrl+X, and then bring it to my dashboard so that whatever settings are left can fit into my background. So I'm going to fit this into my marked area, right? Okay, so for starters, we need to take off the background. Okay, so I can do that, go to Format, Shape Fill, and I choose No Fill. Okay, while this is selected, I can go to Home and then mark the font as white. Okay, then I take off my grid lines and now I can format my actual and budget properly. So I'm going to start off with the actual. So I'll select the line and I'll press Ctrl 1. So when you press Ctrl 1, as I said, anything you can do with that line pops up here. Okay, so I'll come to my fill and line. Okay, so in my line, I want to change the actual to a white color. Okay, the width is too big. I want to reduce it to 1. Usually that's how I like it, so that the markers can show for contrast. Okay, so there's line and there's marker. The marker are the points, right? So the marker options is here. I'll maintain the built-in. The fill, I'm going to change it to a solid fill, okay, but with a white background. So all these will be in the video so that you can take it step by step. And then once I've done this, I think I'm done with my actual. Now let's go to while I'm here, I will just switch to this line, okay, so that I don't lose this part. So I'll come to my line, and to be consistent with the theme I've chosen, I'm going to change this to blue. Okay, reduce the line width to 1. And then I'll come to my marker and I'm going to fill this and make it white. Okay, no line for my border. Sorry, I should make this blue, sorry. So this should be blue. Okay, so that is how you should format your charts. Straight to the point, less noise, okay, so that user focuses on what matters here. Now, the last thing we want to do is to bring in data labels for the actual, right? We don't want to do the two so that it will conflict. At least the story we want here is to know whether we've exceeded budget or not. Okay, so I'll bring in my data labels for just the actual. Now you realize that this is currently a lot on this chart. So we are going to truncate, okay, or shorten it. So you can select the numbers. And as I said, you can press Ctrl 1. Then you come to the numbers options here. Okay, currently set at general, right? But we can create a custom code. Now, the custom code will shorten the display here and give us a K for 1,000. Okay, so 15,122 will be displayed as 15K to make it easier. So 0.0, that's the format, comma. The comma takes off 3 zeros. Okay, so once you do that 0.0 comma, and then you bring in double quotes and you put in the K, okay, for that display. So 0.0 comma, double quote K, double quote, and then you hit add. Okay, so that is how you reduce the display of your labels. Okay, if you have millions, commas will be 2. So 0.0 comma comma. Okay, now let's finish off by taking our border lines, which is currently white, out. So no outline for this. Okay, and then while we are here, we can put a very nice shadow, okay, to this. So we can go to shadow options, okay, and then we'll pick this shadow and then leave it at black. Okay, so later when we take it off, okay, you get this 3D feel here. Okay, it helps with the demarcation. Okay, now the last chart we are going to do is the popular pie chart or donut chart. Okay, so here simply I'm going to stand in my pivot table. Same process. We'll go to insert. We insert a chart. We switch to pie chart, donut here, and then I click OK. So let's do some initial settings here. Of course, it's a pivot chart, so what you need to do is take off the filled buttons. So I'm going to hide all. Go to total. Take it off. It's not serving any purpose here. Okay. Then I can cut this, Control X, and then fit this here in my dashboard. So here, I can fit it in my mocked up area. Okay, you see the usefulness of the lines that we drew so that you can really fit whatever you want to do there. So the same theme is what we are going to use to format this. So I'll come to format, shape fill, none. Okay, and then I'll select my series, press Control 1. Okay, and then mark this white. Okay, just a minute. I think my Excel is tired. It's frozen. Hi Lola, am I still live?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow, for some reason my Excel decided to restart. Probably too much shortcuts. Okay, so let's see if I get something back that we can work with. Wow, took us all the way back. Okay, so this is 537. Okay. Okay, so I'm not too sure we can get enough from here, but let me save this and see what we can get. No, this took us way back. This took us way back. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. My apologies, it happens. So I'm going to walk you through using the final version. Okay, so this is the final version, and I'm going to share this with you. In fact, it's already in the folder.
Yes.
So
yes.
yes, I mean, these things happen. I was hoping it would bring us to a more recent version, then we can continue. Okay, so we were formatting this part. Okay, so again, it has the same no background. Okay, then I changed the shape. Okay, so I changed the shape, the change colors to the second one to agree with my theme. Okay, and then I have my legend. That's what I was trying to do before it crashed. Okay, then the last thing I was going to do was to bring in our slicers. Okay, so when you bring in your slicers, you can now let the slicer interact with each of these elements. Okay, so when you bring in your slicer, okay, what is important is when you click the slicer, you have something called report connections. Okay, so if I want this particular slicer to drive these pivot tables, remember, all these were created with pivot tables. Okay, I can connect them. But again, depending on the story you want to tell, some slicers do not need to slide some visuals. Okay, so example, this is already showing categories, so it will not be good to, let this slice that, because if I do that, it will just be showing me consultancy instead of my top 5. So in this case, it is not connected to this. So you see that I have deactivated pivot table 5, the one that created this visual. Okay, I would have loved to show you that, but I guess that was signal that we should be rounding up. But so essentially, the last part is bringing in the slicers, and then I'll format the slicers to agree with my theme. So I'd like to pause here and then do a little recap. We started with raw data sets, transactions, and budget. Okay, we said that in Excel, we have the Power Query, Power Pivot, Data Model, Pivot Table. All these tools are possible to give us a dynamic dashboard. We've gone through all that. Okay, transformed our data, created our data model. We did our measures. We've done our calculations. Okay, and we are currently working on our dashboard. So if you go through this process, the mockup and all those things, you are now getting this final dashboard that still feeds on your two tables, transactions and budget. Okay, and you can now create something beautiful for yourself or for your users. This is a simple case study, but there are better dashboards that you can create. Concepts are the same. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to teach, and hopefully I can take the last batch of questions before we round up.
Thank you so much, Bernard. One question from me. Can we have your PowerPoint slides?
Yes. I will drop that in the folder as well.
All right, Bolu, please, over to you.
Okay, so the only question that we have unanswered here is from Esther. She says that it should kindly elaborate on formatting numbers to K. If a number with 3 zeros is 1K, what of a number with 6 zeros?
Okay, so I was saying that if you put in a number, okay, so this is 1,000, right? So if I do this, okay, I can take off the 1,000 part, okay, which is the 3 zeros with a comma. Okay, so essentially, when I come to the custom script, okay, 0 represents the generic number, right? Now, if I want to take off the comma, you see when I did 0, comma, it knocks off the 3 zeros. Okay, so if I have 6, it means I'll put in 2 commas. But usually when you want to display a decimal, you can do 0.0 for 1 decimal place, and then you put in comma for that. Okay, so 1 comma for 3 zeros. So if you do 2 commas, then it means if this increases to, okay, 1 million, you can come here, put in 0.0, and then do your 2 commas, and then you have the whole number. In this case, it will be M. Okay, so you have something like this. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. There are no other questions here.
Okay, so if there are no questions, then I guess I'd like to encourage you. This is a good start. Data analytics is really catching on. Whatever profession you are going into, whether it's accounting, health, marketing, add analytics to it, right? So whether it's Excel, Power BI, SQL Server, Python, R, the world needs this very much. So the earlier you start, the better. And it's good that Lola has put this together. So hopefully it will give you a good foundation to build on your skills for the future. Thank you very much. If you want to reach me on LinkedIn, my name is Bernard Obimboateng. So you can reach me on LinkedIn, and I share tips and tricks as well. Okay, so that you can also pick some as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
So before you go, so I'm going to give this recording to the students. So their assignment would be that they should replicate this and share it on LinkedIn. So in case they have any question while replicating it, especially with slicers or any part of that, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn, please?
Yes, they can.
All
I'm
right,
willing to support them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You'll be seeing all our posts on LinkedIn. Thank you. We really appreciate you. And thank you so much,
Fantastic.
Bulu, for moderating this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll see you again on Friday. Ensure that you have your developer account created so that you have access to Power BI service. All right. Thank you, everybody. See you again on Friday. Bye. Please, before we go, let's say bye-bye, Bernard. Bye-bye, Bernard. Bye-bye, Bernard. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Bernard.